attack on Westgate? Just raise your hands, right? This is the difference. The terrorists want us, part of the reason they choose Kenya is because Kenya is a hub, an international media hub. They know that if you attack the University of Nairobi today, that it will be known throughout the world what you did. And so we have been calling on our media to exercise caution and restraint. Why multiply the effect of terrorism on the front page? In fact, sometimes families may even find out that their person died by reading the newspaper. You open the newspaper and you see your loved one there. So we must encourage the media to approach these matters differently. Now, let me not just lay blame and finger point. Part of why they're doing this is simply because they may not know. And they may in fact think that by putting that picture is what shows how evil those people who did that are. So I don't want to ascribe necessarily negative or ill motives on the part of the media, but certainly they need more information. At the same time, so do we all. From tweeting and retweeting that picture that has been sent to you, just hold it back, or send a picture of a cat, send a picture of a nice puppy, or something. You know, you don't have to send a picture of somebody wounded. But the issue of media, terrorism is, ironically and horrifically, is a message through blood and suffering. It's a media message. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to make a point. So by us refusing to allow them to make that point, like if a terrorist kills you and no one knows, they failed. They have totally failed. So the media environment leads to a lot of terrorist issues. Now, that leads me to why Kenya? Why Kenya and not some neighboring states? Of course, those neighboring states have also been hit. Uganda has certainly been a victim. Tanzania has had terrorism. Ethiopia itself has had terrorism. But I think the question was about degrees, I think. And here we have an issue about what is Kenya. And I'll tell you, Kenya is doing something that many people in the world have not yet understood. Kenya is broadening and deepening its democracy while fighting terrorism. Have you guys read about what civil liberties are going through in Europe? Have you? These established democracies are narrowing their civil liberties to fight this war. France today is under a state of emergency after 150 of their citizens died. After 150 of our citizens died in Garissa earlier this year, we didn't declare a state of emergency. That state of emergency would have helped the security forces because we would not have had any concern with arresting you and we need to charge you by 48 hours. We know a lot of the people taking part in this crime, but sometimes we don't have the evidence. And so we watch them, waiting for them to trip up and to mess up. Then we catch them. But sometimes they don't mess up. Sometimes they don't trip up. They're talking on WhatsApp, they're talking on Telegram, they're talking where? So their plan can get so close to its achievement, sometimes without security agencies knowing. The countries that do not have laws like ours, the moment I suspect you, I sweep you out of the street. Yeah? And that's why you see some very important differences. At the same time, Kenya has a huge number of targets, soft targets, targets that are associated with the West, targets that are associated with a sort of globalized lifestyle. So we are vulnerable to that extent. Now, what we've done is the Garissa attack was a shattering, horrifying act. And I remember being in State House on that day, and our president and the efforts he was putting. The first thing has been the vast improvement in the coordination between our different security services. The second thing has been the raising of our operational tempo to levels hitherto unknown in Kenya. However, and here we need to be honest, we need to be successful 100% of the time, and they need to be lucky just once. France, with its advanced intelligence and technology, intelligence capabilities and technology, France that had been hit in January, the Charlie Hebdo magazine, they were hit again. People traveled from Brussels. Others came through as refugees from Syria. At least one. Ideology. How are we taking on the ideology? My friend who asked that question, this is the most difficult thing. And let me tell you, we are appealing, and I'm going to be appealing for the help of young, innovative, smart Kenyans. Yeah? I'll tell you, I don't read many of the languages that ideology is in. That ideology is aimed at a 21-year-old guy. It's been a long time since I was 21. Right? So we need to tap into you. We need to tap into those young Kenyans who know how to write a song that everyone listens to, who know how to explain why we live in a special country that requires us to protect it, that know how to poke fun and make fun of the ridiculous lies that these terrorists say. Like the other day, I saw somebody calling Al-Shabaab Al-Kebab, right? Now, it's funny, but let me tell you, the power of laughter against overly serious, brutal human beings is devastating. The last thing they want is people to laugh at them. But we must take on that ideology. We are working with a number of civil society organizations and religious leaders in the country to be able to do that. But I'm telling you, we will win that war when Kenyans turn their democracy into an ideological weapon with which to argue privately and in public about this country. And who else but you? Who else but you? Right to protect. Right to protect, as you know, Madam, has a lot to do with intervening on state-sanctioned violence against non-combatants and civilians. I'm interested in whether you meant the right to protect can extend towards protecting civilian populations from terrorist organizations. Without understanding exactly, and you can see me after this if I don't satisfy your question, I take your question to be, how can we protect people? And what is it that could be causing this terrorism, and you use the word marginalization, that we can do to stop that marginalization so that the terrorism stops? Let me say this. The word marginalization is used in Kenya extensively. It's even in our constitution. That word, I find it very interesting. It implies that there was a decision at some point to marginalize someone. The history of Kenya is a history, first a colonial history, in which all Kenyans were marginalized by a colonial state that did not include their welfare in any part of its thinking or practice, except in very minimal fashion. Then we got our independence, and many parts of the country that had previously been left almost untouched by the colonial regime stayed with very, very low levels of state presence and developmental presence. And that led the people in that part of the country to suffer a great deal. Is their suffering the cause of terrorism? No. I have very poor relatives myself. Are they terrorists? No. The majority of people you know who are having a hard time economically, they're not criminals, they're not terrorists. In fact, study after study shows that terrorists, the attackers themselves and their supporters, tend to be drawn from the more educated. They tend to be more educated than the average. They tend to come from homes with more resources than the average. Not necessarily that they're rich, but terrorism is not the weapon of the poor. Terrorism is the weapon of the angry. Yeah? And they're angry for a variety of reasons. And the world has a lot of things that can make you angry. There's no way you can deny that, seeing what has happened in the world. But what we're saying is that here in Kenya, our anger has been boiled down into a thing called the Constitution that says, take that anger, run it through the Constitution to your local court, to your local MP, to your local MCA, form an organization, form an NGO, form a student union body, demonstrate peacefully, petition for change, write anything you want in the newspaper, say anything you want except inciting. There are things that are out against the law. If you're marginalized, if you insist that that word describes you, insist that devolution has yet to reach you, camp outside your governor's door, go see the county commissioner. In other words, in Kenya, to say you must kill a Kenyan child, a pregnant Kenyan woman, because you claim to be marginalized, is an outrageous claim, and we reject it in its entirety. What Kenya has done is to attempt in 3 years to do what we did a study about devolution. The average country that has done devolution over the last 50 years has taken at least 7 years to reach where we were almost when we started. Yeah? So we are trying. Are we perfect? No. Are Kenyans poor? Yes. Are Kenyans suffering? Absolutely. Do Kenyans need jobs? Yes. Are Kenyans always treated the way they should be treated? No. Do Kenyans have a way to agitate and improve their lives? Yes. Right? Now, the resolutions passed, but the impact is not seen. I join you in that critique because, let me tell you, as an ambassador to the UN, nothing used to drive me as crazy as it's 4 in the morning, we're still debating, other people are threatening to walk out, and I'm like, what will it do? What will this thing do? What will it do that the one last year didn't? You see? What will it do? I used to keep asking myself that. And so we have to see the resolutions for what they are. For many, many countries, there's be a small country in the South Pacific that has never even seen the victim of a terrorist attack, but they're right there debating. And the reason they're doing it is not because they're not concerned, but it's because at the end of the day, they don't feel it's their thing. It's over there. And the majority of countries in the world don't feel that urgency. And a lot of what happens at the UN is a signaling action. You do it to appear to be something. You vote against landmines so as to appear to be a good, moral, ethical country. So what we can do, let me say this, is first be far more aggressive as Kenyan diplomats in insisting on action items in the resolutions. That is the most difficult thing. When you've seen these words, words like we invite, da-da-da, we welcome, da-da-da, we note, da-da-da. The word we resolve, we direct, those words are very difficult to get on a UN resolution. It takes unusual diplomatic strength and consensus building to reach them. So we can say as Kenyan diplomats that we're going to be less about mdomo and more about seeking action-oriented issues on terrorism. And you here and other students of diplomacy can seek to write more about how to action UN resolution. there was a very tough question on why there are less attacks in a neighboring country than in our country. I think I went a bit into it, into seeing why Kenya in particular. Now, Kenya has been hit more often than we want. Our security forces have continued to learn, because let me tell you, when you do an after-action review of any particular incident, the first thing that jumps out at you, who here has served in the military or the police? Just raise your hand. Yeah? Now, these gentlemen can tell you that if you do an after-action review of any particular field operation you had, you will always find there was a better way you could have done it. And so the continual pressure to keep improving, the continual pressure to equip our people with the right equipment, to give them the right information, to provide for them, to allow them to have better conditions of service. These are the challenges we have to ensure that they continue getting better and better. I, at this point, think we have vastly improved. Do I think we are at the perfect point in terms of our capabilities, that we are all that we can be? Absolutely not. There's a lot more we're going to need to do. And the most important thing, and the great differentiator between us and certain countries in the neighborhood, is the connection between the people and the security forces. A lot of Kenyans, because of complex historical reasons, don't come out to say what they see. When somebody comes to rent a room from you, and every day their curtains are closed, they never talk to anyone, you suspect that there's something going on in that house, but you don't know what it is. You know, Kenyans, you just say, hey, wacha hii mambo. Yeah? Sometimes when you say you want to go, you're not quite sure where you need to go. So the NCTC has a lot of work to do to create enough contact points for Kenyans to say, I'm going to go there and I'm going to feel safe and protected by going to report my suspicions. I think I answered the issue of why terrorism, and I hope that was okay. Yeah. The priority of fighting this thing is number 1, 2, and 3. And the reason is, unlike any other form of crime in Kenya, this one has the ability to destroy our country because it seeks to divide us. And Kenya already we've had a history of being divided. So if these guys succeed, you're going to find Kenyans divided, and our politics will then do the rest of the damage. And so the threat of this attack, if you look at the number of Kenyans who die from terrorism compared to car accidents, if it's just numbers of deaths, then car accidents are a worse risk. But because of its threat to our country, its existence and our democracy, it is a number 1 priority for us. Yeah.
Okay, some 3 questions, please. Say your name and ask your question fairly quickly.
Okay, my name is Macharia Solomon. I wanted to ask about content in media, just going back to media. And I'm reviewing the post-9/11 film and television content with just trying to generate a correlation between the strategies used in those films and what actually happens in the actual ground. For instance, when a terrorist happens, what do they do? How do the security officers organize themselves? And I'm finding out a positive correlation between those two. And so I understand when you mean that we need to generate our own ideology in the form of media and propel it to strengthen our national security. But the problem with that is the lack of information on Kenyan security issues. That has always been most of the documents are secret. Even when you go to parliament, they still take time to produce the Hansard. When you go to the police, it's so hard to acquire this information and collaborate your research with it. So kindly address to the access of information regarding security issues. Thank you.
We have been reading in the papers that the Al-Shabaab, and particularly the person who organized the attack in Garissa, has already joined ISIS. In terms of preparedness, we are aware that ISIS is more lethal than Al-Shabaab. How prepared is Kenya with these dynamics and changes? How prepared are we to this new threat that's likely to emerge as a result of Al-Shabaab joining ISIS?
Thank you very
Those two
much.
then will be enough.
May I direct myself to the ambassador? I'd asked the question just the moment you got in as we were doing the debate. Much of the time when we focus on counterterrorism, we only focus on the perpetrators. But what do you do to the victims? Many of the times you are only given figures of the people who die. But what about the many who suffer other problems associated with that attack? Thank you.
Thank you. On the issue of content in the media and access of information, you will all realize as Kenyans that until very recently, security was a realm that was not spoken about. Security was for security agencies. And so that's been the history. And indeed, globally, that's very much been the history. And let's say when you have armies fighting armies, that makes sense. But when you have attacks on civilians by people hidden within the civilian population, then it doesn't make so much sense. So the issue of access to more information, you will find that